Looking today at the success of the Corrs, Ireland's biggest music export since U2, it's hard to imagine they could ever have struggled to make it. Their 1995 debut album, Forgiven Not Forgotten, was an immediate international success, but it was the follow-up, Talk on Corners, that really put them on the map. That album, inspired in part by their version of Fleetwood Mac's song Dreams, would spend a year in the UK top 10, reaching #1 an astonishing 4 times. It made the Corrs, and in particular Andrea, some of the most recognisable performers on the planet. They topped that success with In Blue in the year 2000, and their latest album, Borrowed Heaven, looks set to continue the trend. A family band comprising sisters, Andrea on vocals, Sharon on violin, Caroline on drums, and brother Jim on guitar, they started on the road to success in Dundalk, a small town just south of the border with Northern Ireland, in a house filled with a love of music and parents who had been semi-pro musicians.
We've been playing since we were, I suppose, pretty much toddlers, because there was a piano in one of the bedrooms, and I mean, as soon as we could reach the keys, we were just banging away, and we were constantly listening to what our parents were performing themselves, what they were rehearsing, and what they were just listening to. And so, you know, growing up in that environment, I think, developed for us a love of music from very, very early on.
I think most parents looked at mum and dad and went, what are you doing encouraging your children in this awful industry, you know? But, I mean, it was sort of a dream unfulfilled for them, totally. I mean, you know, I think they probably felt that they could have gone further themselves. And certainly they had an incredible love of music, and it was great for them because they had their day jobs, but they had this outlet where I remember them coming home from shows and they'd sit in front of the fire and have a drink, and they just were on a high after a really good show. So they wanted that for us, and I think that they very much trusted John, our manager, so they knew that we weren't going to sort of get into the sort of really sleazy end of the industry.
That manager was former musician John Hughes, who discovered the band while seeking cast members for the film The Commitments, and was immediately impressed by their talent.
Jim, obviously being the oldest, had been around with quite a few bands, and he'd more experience than we had. I mean, myself and Andrew were like, I was 16, Andrew was 15, Sharon, what, 19 or something. So we were all quite young and just kind of coming out of school. So we had, you know, we'd obviously had our instruments and we had a musical background, but we had no idea about, you know, working in a band situation, you know. And I think it was when we auditioned for the Commitments film that we'd actually met John. But we only, to audition for that movie, we did 2 covers because we actually hadn't written anything of our own at that stage.
After The Commitments, the band started to rehearse and write, and quite quickly their interest in traditional Irish music and their ear for a good song started to give them the distinctive sound we know today.
I think it was obvious, you know, what we had within us. I mean, I think musically that was quite self-evident, really. I mean, vocally we you know, and from musical influence, we'd always be interested in melody and harmony, and we had those tools within us, you know, and also Sharon playing the violin and everything, and we loved pop music, you know, we loved melodic music, and so that kind of thing just came out naturally when we started to write.
And I think we did do quite a bit of experimentation at that time. We even tried getting close to what was contemporary at the time, with disastrous results, I think. Myself and Sharon had a small group that we went out and played just purely for money, because we'd no income basically, and I'd stop all my session work in Dublin, so I'd moved back home. So literally, we'd no money coming in, and so the stuff that we started to do was I had a sampler and I sampled a baron, and from that then we started doing our own interpretation of traditional Irish songs. Myself and Sharon, and covering stuff like Mary Black and it was that influence then that we brought into the Corrs in a very short period of time. So by about the 4th number that we'd written, I think then the sound was starting to be defined. You're forgiven.
You're forgiven, not forgotten. You're forgiven, not forgotten. You're not forgotten. A bleeding heart torn apart, left on an icy grave. In the room where they once lay, face to face, nothing could get in their way. But now the memories of a man are haunting her days, and the craving never fades. She's still dreaming of a man not forgiven, but not forgotten. You're forgiven, not forgotten. You're forgiven, not forgotten. You're forgiven.
Holding out for an international deal, how the Corrs found it is the stuff of near legend. Invited to play a New York show by the American ambassador, the band decided to take the opportunity to pay an unannounced visit on music legend David Foster.
Our manager saw that as an opportunity while we were out there to go and basically shop for a record deal and just to go around, because we were physically there, and I think when you're physically there, it's much more likely that you'll have a better chance of being signed. So we went around a load of record companies and basically nothing happened. But eventually, John, I think we went into Atlantic Records and we met with a guy called Jason Flom in there. And he said, oh, I'd love you to meet with David Foster, who was their in-house producer at the time. And he couldn't arrange a meeting, but John found out that David was recording Michael Jackson's History album in the Hit Factory in New York. So he said, look, let's just go down, see what happens. So we got all glammed up. I mean, I was in this long black dress. It was sweltering in New York, but it was the only kind of decent clothes we had at the time, so we had to wear it. We arrived down, instruments, and John just said to the big, huge bouncer, he said, we're here to see David Foster. Not like we don't have an appointment and we haven't been invited. No, we're here to see him. So they let us in. And David was very curious and took us upstairs, and I think we played him a demo of Love to Love You, didn't we?
And we did Forgiven Not
Close
Forgotten.
to you, I think, as well.
Closer, yeah. And then Forgiven Not Forgotten, we played around the piano with, you know, the baritone, vocal, and violin, and piano. And he was just blown over. And the next day we were due to fly home. And John, I remember John rang me the next morning, I was in bed or whatever, and he said, your flight's leaving at blah, 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 so we're leaving the hotel, and by the way, you've got a record deal. And I went, okay, John, and put the phone down, not realising, it was like, you know, it didn't go in, but it was pretty amazing, and it was, you know, I suppose after 5 years of trying and developing our sound and trying with different record companies, it was great for it to finally happen.